I'm Linda. I'm an artist and designer from Senegal. I was born and raised in Senegal. I then, from the age of 16, just traveled around the world for like school and then work. Ultimately came back here to start my family and also my studio. I've been making work with whatever I can make work with since I can remember. that's that's really a description of the mediums that I'm interested in. It is a reflection of my current interests, not so much skills. I think I actually start using a tool before I'm really good at it. And there's something really nice that I'm realizing with maturity about just having the misplaced confidence to try something you're not good at and still put out work you made with it. That's definitely a defining characteristic of me as an artist. I went to college for geography and urban studies, and I thought I wanted to plan cities. I think I just loved my city, and I wanted to just be immersed in it while I was in the middle of like North Carolina, just completely disoriented. But yeah, so I didn't study what I ended up doing for work, which was design. I actually dropped out of college my junior year because I was just like, what am I doing here? I'm wasting these people's times. I don't really know why I'm here. And so after I dropped out, I started working. So the first job I had was in consulting. And that was boring. It was interesting in that I was a 19-year-old in a world full of adults making really big decisions and influencing like governments. And I was like, okay, fine. This is big responsibilities. It's interesting enough for me to stick around, but I can do it for longer than 7 months because I burnt out. Obviously, it's too much on my little head. And then I worked at Google and I did a bunch of stuff at Google. Like I was just, whatever project they could give me, I did it. And kind of learned about design through that experience and decided I wanted to kind of study that more closely. And as I did it, I realized it was kind of like art, except in service of capitalism. I mean, art is in service of capitalism too, in a way, but this was way more obvious. Therefore, I could sell to my parents that I was a creative, but I still made a salary, and they would feel so scared for my life. That's how I ended up in design. I've always been creative. Like I've always drawn, and I'm not the only one. Like my grandpa, my dad, my mom, everyone is creative in my family. So I've always seen it around. I just never thought of it as a career. I think I still struggle today to see it as a career. I don't know if that's like a common experience. I'm better at learning something as I'm doing it rather than learn it and then do it. Maybe it's because I have ADHD, but I need to have a deadline and the fear of God placed into me in order to go and learn something effectively. The best way for me to learn something is to like sign up for it. You know, I need to make a logo. Okay, how do you make a logo? And then you go and look at all these logos people have made. Okay, some of them use a weird like grid-like structure. Okay, what's that called? Like, what's a grid? Who invented a grid for design? Oh, wait, what's this German school of design? Like, who's Bauhaus? Like, what? And then. I give myself these like impossible tasks, which have deadlines, which will result in me just like wallowing in shame and self-loathing if I don't complete them, which then give me the focus that I need to actually learn what I need to do. And I think it's worked really well throughout my life. I don't remember like learning anything in class. Like I remember class being just like the thing you had to wait out. Like I was not a bad student. I was a bright student throughout my life, but I hacked my way through school. I was doing stuff outside of it in order to keep good grades. So I think for me, it's really about doing and then using doing as an excuse for learning. And it gives me like so much motivation to do things that are otherwise really hard to do. Like for example, like when I get really interested in something, whatever it is, eventually it leads to a research paper, like a peer research paper, right? Which has like, you know, anywhere between like 5 to like 100 pages. You have to sit down and read all that. Without that pressure, I can't read it. But with the pressure, I will find a way to read it. Yeah. And so that's kind of how it works for me. When I was a designer, what happens is if you're good at your job, you keep moving up, and eventually you start managing people, and you kind of are doing less design work. And so I was in that position for a while, and I remember I resisted it for a while. I was telling my bosses that I just wanted to keep making stuff. I didn't want to manage people. And they were like, but you're gonna be so good at it. Turns out I wasn't so good at it at all. I was actually kind of an impatient boss. I just didn't understand when people didn't have work ethic in the same way that I did, which was, at the time, neurotic. I was just crazy. Like, no one should work like that. People should have work-life balance. I just remember doing less design work which meant I had the chance to be so creative. At least in certain parts of the project, you get to be as creative as you want because the brief is loose. Clients generally don't know what they want, and you get to in the beginning just give them a bunch of options of things they could want. And I remember always pushing for things that were out there, things that didn't feel like what everyone else was doing or the competitors were doing. And I remember always using that as an opportunity to learn a new tool or experiment with something else. That was the first time in my life where I realized when I don't get my way and make art, I burn out. My energy is very finite for things that are not art related. And so I took a sabbatical and I said I was gonna travel Southeast Asia and learn how to cook. And the pandemic happened and I was stuck at home, bunch of money that I had saved to travel. And I had a year, basically that I could live and not work. And I couldn't go anywhere, so I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm just gonna do just stuff, open Illustrator, open all these programs. Oh, I wanted to teach myself JavaScript. Oh, what's AI? And just a random set of rabbit holes and circumstances led me to make a shit ton of work during that year. And then a friend came to visit me when things were reopening and he said, but you're an artist. And I was like, no, jokes. Absolutely not. He was like, no, you could literally take this stuff and apply for residencies. Just try it out. And I started applying, and then one of them got back to me, was like, you got shortlisted. And I was like, what the fuck? Do you know me? And that's kind of how it started. I was like, well, if one person sort of thinks I could be this thing, maybe there's a little bit of me that is. And so I just asked my artist friends, hey, is there anywhere you post your work? And he was like, oh yeah, for sure. I've been playing with blockchain. Do you want to try it? And I minted some works and the rest is history. I've been an artist for 5 years. I started calling myself an artist 3 years ago. I would introduce myself as an artist. I still feel like an outsider to this thing. I still do. I have very few thematic obsessions, I would say. In terms of disciplines, I'm very irreverent. It doesn't matter to me. But when it comes to themes, I'm obsessed about a couple of things. One is this idea of home, because I've been transient since the age of 5. And then 2, this idea of memory, because I can't remember anything. And 3, I think it's maybe a universal obsession, is love. It's what does it mean? And I think those 3 things are connected. Love, home, memory kind of live together. They kind of exist in the same realm. For some reason, my idea of home is my first home to this day. The home that I lived in when I was between 0 to 5 is the only home I remember as home, even though I haven't lived there in 27 years now. And so this project is actually one of those projects that's I use an excuse to do this. I was working on something else. I was working on a different project and it involved a lot of AI training on maps. And the more I looked at maps, especially maps of my hometown, the more I wanted to sort of pin down what my house looked like, what the neighborhood looked like. And I wanted to really dig deep. Okay, what was the shape of the staircase? What was the shape of the tile? What was the color of the tile? What was the path to this friend's house? And if I wanted to go from this friend's house to that friend's house, how would I do it? And I realized that I had good memory for very specific detail like that, really specific granular shit like that, but I didn't have if I wanted to conjure up an image of our dining hall, our dining room, I couldn't see it, or the face of someone, I could see their fingernail, or finger shape but not a face. So this is kind of a play on these 3 words, and I think every single project of mine you'll find those 3 themes coming back. You have snippets, you literally have tracings of buildings, right? You have shapes of buildings, shapes of staircases deconstructed. Everything is sort of blown apart and deconstructed in an automated way, thrown into this canvas to live together. So, and each of these is named after one landmark that I'm trying to remember, but it involves randomly assorting all the elements of my hometown that I could remember. So it uses one program that takes all these snippets and just randomly throws them into one canvas. I think it's a fun way for me to use generative art because basically it's an allegory or kind of metaphor for how I'm remembering. Using a generative algorithm to do this was just the best way to do it in a way that felt true to actually the act of remembrance, like how it works. And I think it's a general theme of just me existing in the world. Because of the way my brain works, I constantly feel like a body in motion. It always feels like I'm traversing, right? Like nothing is fixed. I'm constantly moving. The reason why I think that's important because it goes back to my first 5 years feeling anchored in a space and never feeling like that again. And so from that moment on, just always feeling like a body in space that's constantly in motion. I think that generally comes back into my work. Even now that I started doing more animation, there's always traveling. Like you're always going somewhere. If it feels like it's fixed in place, I feel uncomfortable. So this is a picture of my grandma in her store. And when I was a baby, I used to be right here on the counter and I would greet customers for her. And I spoke really early in my life because I think I was like, I was working. I was like welcoming people. So I figured out how to say hi, welcome. I didn't have this photo. I literally saw the physical photo last week, but I had a memory of this place and I think I also had a memory of having seen this photo. And this is underneath our house. So like our house was on the top floor and my grandma's shop was at the bottom floor. And she was really like, she was known as a shopkeeper. Like everybody loved coming to her store. It was good vibes. It was great vibes. I wanted to recreate the vibe of being there and how it felt. I think I remember generative AI came out. Everybody was like crazy about it because I had been working with GANs up to this point. And I was like, I'm not in a picture of making like ready-made images. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to create an artwork by just prompting it because I don't know what I want to see. Like that's not how I make art. I don't know how I do it, but it's definitely not like I have a vision in my head and I want to recreate that vision. I started prompting for like groceries. I was like, okay, let's see, groceries. I'm like, okay, I could collage this into something. It's interesting. You get like a lot of different snippets, and this is the beautiful, like this is the beautiful era of generative AI when it couldn't write, it couldn't do textures well. It just was so aspirational and so weird and so gorgeously textured. And there's also a very Japanese sort of like style of collage that I've always been drawn to that I sort of bring in here. And then I wanted to have, basically, you can see the composition of these and the composition of the photo I showed. I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm putting a body in front of groceries. And so for the body, I generated faces, obviously. It didn't feel right. It felt uninteresting to have a face showing when what I really cared about compositionally was this juxtaposition of like the human body with this like consumable goods. And that's all I wanted to create. So what's like the face didn't really matter. And also at the time, AI was terrible at making black faces. The eye would be like over here in the forehead and the other eye was in the cheek. Like it was bad. It was just bad and like terribly racist. And so I was like, you know what, let's kill two birds with one stone. Get rid of the face. We still get the punch of having a human being there because our brain fills in the gap. But then also, it became a metaphor for remembering this image and not remembering my grandma's face in it or what she was wearing. So like, it was like, okay, this makes sense. Again, this is memory. You remember some things, you just don't remember some of the more important things, which can be frustrating. Like somebody passes away over time, you start to lose their face. And it's another form of grief. Like 10, 15 years after they've passed, you're experiencing a new grief. So there's a P5 sketch that basically does this collage, right? And the words are basically a poem that I wrote to my grandma, and it like infinitely scrolls through the images. And so the image is a snippet of the scrolling as it passes. Like it's a moment in time of me reciting this poem, but not really. I'm not reciting it like an algorithm is reciting it. I was working on this book for my grandparents, about my grandparents, and I remember there was a photo of them. Photos damaged. It was the two of them kind of like their faces really close together, so you can tell if they were kissing or not. So for that image where they like their faces were smooshed together, I wanted to suggest that they might have been kissing. I know they were not. So I put this like little starfish thing, and I did it really quickly with the pen tool. So I did like a little When you use that pen tool and you just keep it, like you keep the pen tool before you close it, it just like becomes geometric also. It just, if there were rounded shapes, they become really straight. So I left it at that. And then I decided like, oh, you could actually make this programmatically. And then I had it generate multiple different kinds of this type of star thing. But because of the image I did it with, it looked like they were kissing, and it looked like it was like not safe for viewing content. So I think when you start using a tool before you're really good at using it, it's hard to sort of understand philosophically what it's really good at. You have to use it a few times. So I trained a bunch on it. I trained on paintings, I trained on like charcoal and ink drawings, I trained on photographs, and then I started to understand Gantt as a really interesting way to search an archive, potentially. To create one and then to search it. If you think about it visually, you have this like massive map of latent space. And then whenever you generate something, it's generating at different parts of that map. And then there's the between these outputs, like what happens there. That sort of like investigation of like, how do you get more from the latent space? Like how do you go into the edges of the map and look for like really fringe outputs, or what's the average output like? And then obviously we talk about AI and this averaging effect. If that averaging effect exists, that means there's sort of like the outer rims of the map also exist, right? So I started to think about it that way, and I wanted to do something that would reflect that really well, or that would allow me to at least prove that. And so the most interesting thing were flowers, because there's something very universal about how we understand flowers, how we classify them. We generally agree on what flowers are and how important they are and how they exist in our world, and we even have added layers of meaning, like some flowers mean certain things. Like we have a sort of shared vocabulary for how we understand them, and also they are beautiful and undebatably so, right? And so I was like, okay, let's just think about how I use this and map that onto a specific memory that I want to recreate, which was like my grandma's garden growing up, my great grandma's garden, then my grandma's garden. How do I try to explore what flowers might have existed? Because I don't remember anything that was in that garden. Like I know it existed, I just wasn't interested in plants back then, and so I can't remember for the life of me. I know jasmine because we use jasmine a lot to we put it in bowl with water to put fragrance in the house. But aside from that, I didn't know what else we grew. And so I did like, okay, let's use a very scientific approach for this. What region of the world do we live in? Let's look at archives, the botanical archives for that region. Let's look at a time frame where my great grandma would have been planting these flowers, and then my grandma would have been taking care of them. And I realized that we've lost about 60% of biodiversity around the world. I had very little means to remember visually. It wouldn't be pictures, it would be something else. So I thought I was going to train again with images. Instead, I didn't have enough images to train again. So what do I need to do? Well, at first I thought I'm just going to throw in this GAN anything and everything I can find, like herbarium pages. Except if you've trained again before, you know that if you have outputs that are that far apart from each other, things I could find are flowers, things I could find are sketches. It's just not going to turn out great. And lo and behold, ChatGPT comes out, not DALL-E 3 or 2, I don't remember which one, comes out, and you can actually prompt for an image. And I was like, jackpot. I just need to create synthetic data to train this GAN. Like, I can actually train this GAN and use AI to train this GAN. So I make synthetic data, which at the time I didn't know a lot of researchers do anyway. Like, if you're training a big model, you actually have to rely on synthetic data to do it. I just did it by necessity, right? Like, I had rich information. I had sometimes the herbarium, which is a dried plant, and sometimes I had annotation. Like, sometimes the botanists would go ham and write all the notes, tell you what color was the stem versus the flower in bloom versus whatever. It would just give you a lot of rich. Sometimes I would find entries in botanical archives or books or research papers that had more descriptions of the plant. And I would just take all of that, put it in the prompt, and say, give me something. It wasn't that good yet, but it was enough to start training and get somewhere. And this is the best place I got to. These spectral like flower, like your brain really wants you to believe it's a flower, but like, you know, it's not. It's still one of the most beautiful chapters of the project because everything that comes after this anchors on this. It's like, as it grows in definition, this is always the starting point. And every single chapter of this project is the same thing, right? I just become curious and I try something. I'm not actually releasing the outputs from the models at all. I'm releasing stuff that I make with it. I still think of them at this point as like starting points, as like snippets that I can infuse into an artwork. And I'm still making the artwork because in my mind, the outputs of these models they're the result of research. They're not the result of an artistic point of view. And so I'm just figuring out what derivatives I can make. And so every chapter from this on, from 2, 3, 4, 5, it's just derivatives. And then when we released with Fellowship, was the first time people actually got access to the model outputs at every stage. And the end video, which is the derivative of that chapter. It's helped me get closer to my grandma. Every time I open this project and I do something with it, it's like a prayer. It's like I'm praying to my grandma. Every time. Nothing in my life has gotten me closer to her, except for being with her since she's passed away. She's constantly in my mind since this project. And because of this project. And so, do I have to abandon it? I don't know. The first few chapters I didn't really have control over. The last few chapters I started to understand, okay, this is what I'm working on. There's like a sense that in the middle, like in the middle flower, there's achievement. Like we've achieved some kind of photorealism. This is probably the best estimate we'll get. And then models become stubborn. They really want to give you like high definition, like editorial style photographs for advertising. And so they become more plastic. They literally physically use plastic-like textures in order to bounce off more light. Like they want to give you more impressive things. And so even if you're prompting for flowers, it will try to make it an impressive flower because a normal flower isn't good enough anymore. Like that's where they are now. And it's incredibly hard to break away from that paradigm which they have now. And so I wanted to show that arc in this project, like to show the evolution of AI models and how we are getting into a space of rotting, right? Like we're getting a space where the images are corrupted because the images are not trying to just be images, they're trying to be aspirational images so that we use them instead of real images. It's like they're positioning themselves normatively now in a way they weren't trying to do before. The latest piece I've written, it was for the British Council position paper. They've gathered a bunch of artists, creative practitioners together to make a stand that technology needs artists more than ever. And the piece I wrote was this idea that you kind of have the best critiques of AI happening in art. Like some of the most honest outlook on AI are by artists like Trevor Packlin, Kay Crawford, artists who are looking at this technology with a critical lens and are exposing the way it works and the way it affects us. It's not all obviously doom and gloom story. It's really about just exposing it, like show us what the implications are at a human level if I don't understand the way this technology works. So I think we have sort of like understood AI as magic. Even in the icons we use to describe it, it's a little like magic wand. This narrative that AI is magic and not math is being pushed really hard, and it couldn't be further from the truth. It is still math. It's still not magic yet. There's people with thoughts and ideas and they try them. A similar thing I could think about is economics. Like we think of economics as like an esoteric discipline that nobody understands except for economists, when it's literally about the way we like relate to each other and live our lives, right? But it's been made very difficult for us to understand for very specific reasons, because we don't want everyone to understand economics. Otherwise, how do you take advantage of it? I think we should resist that if it's happening with AI as well. Another thing about AI is if you reject the premise that you can't understand it because you're not a developer, how do you understand it? And this is where artists come in. The work artists are doing with AI or about AI. And I think we should accept the crowds that are coming with all their insults and all their vitriol, because there's legitimately no other place for them to like you can't go in front of the Google headquarters and do it. Like, who's gonna listen to you, right? It's not just Google. Like, it's a lot of different companies coming together and working on this technology. And they might be doing it, like, they might have the same agenda on some things, they might not have the same agenda on something. And these companies are not evil. Like, they don't come to work thinking I'm gonna destroy the world every day. That's not how things work. Like, it's complex, and you have artists who are able to take that complexity, break it down, and remove the sort of binary of evil versus good, and show you that it's difficult and messy to create technology, and it's difficult to make it fair to everyone, which is why you have to keep harping on that point and keep advocating for that. AI has infiltrated so much of our existence. It was in the algorithms that we used to connect with each other. It was in the ways we shopped, right? It's the way we listen to music. It was everywhere already. It's just the difference is now we can see, and we resisted it. I want to ask more daring questions of AI. Like, I want to say, for example, if you're going to be around, if you're going to be omnipresent in our lives, almost like a god, do you function like one? Like, do you have spirituality? What's your moral compass? Like, how do you understand us beyond our physical embodiments and our economic needs, like a spiritual being? And if we can't find answers to those questions, then maybe it is not magic after all, and it might never be. I'm also asking these questions to myself. If AI were to intervene in my idea of spirituality, in what ways will it intervene? And it would be silly to think that AI is not going to have an influence on religion. It's a revolution as big as the printing press, going from like not be able to reproduce content to like all of a sudden you can infinitely reproduce content and spread it. Then you think about what that's done for like the Christian religion, going from the Bible being a sacred, very limited edition object that only erudites would have access to a Bible being in every single drawer of every motel. So what the printing press did for Christianity, you can only wonder what AI is going to do for us. What does it mean when this intersection happens? Is it dangerous? Is it interesting? Is it scary? So I think there's a lot of questions, a lot of curiosities that I have about AI and these sort of very human dimensions that are otherwise untouched by technology. But really they interact with technology in some ways, and they definitely will with AI. And so I wanted to go there. I really wanted to challenge myself and go there. And so I'm not using a typical religion in order to do this project. I'm actually using an indigenous religion. It's from my mother's tribe, which is the Serer tribe of Senegal. They're one of the oldest people in the Senegambia region. They're so old that like other languages in the region draw from them, and they have a belief system that used to be called animist, or sometimes can be called pagan, whatever. Again, those are like Abrahamic filters, Abrahamic words on, but I don't think that's how they see themselves at all. They have a system of beliefs that relies on seeing the world as three different planes that interact with each other. So you have the plane of ancestors, you have the plane of reality, which is where everyone is, and then you have a sort of in-between plane where people and things can cross. And it's a religion that I even struggle to call it religion. I want to say it is a knowledge system that is sort of understood and performed ritualistically through nature. So nature is a huge part of this system of belief, this knowledge system. And in fact, there's like 5 sacred trees that you have to use for all kinds of rituals. And so it's a very interesting, it's an old religion. It's older than like Islam and Christianity, and older than a lot of the religions we are familiar with. Because of the way it works, nature is a very intricate part. And so with nature disappearing, the groundings of the religion are sort of loosening, right? And so as climate change is rocking the Senegambia region, what is it sort of surviving in if the trees are dying, right? It's in an endangered place, which I'm always interested in. And it's also interesting because it's got a lot of symbolism. There's a lot of incantation and proverbs that bring up these imagery. It's very visual. And so I'm using that, and I'm doing a couple of things with it. I'm using the language, the Serer language, as a shortcut to the religion. I'm not doing this by myself. I have a collaborator, and we're working on different aspects of the project. So he's working on training the multimodal LLM to try and sort of act as a priest of the religion or the knowledge system. And I'm sort of creating prayers or access. I'm opening up access portals by investigating visually what this imagery brings up. And I think the best way to do this is by playing with the latent space. And so providing a mix of frames and words that sort of bring up these incantations in like a visual form, and doing that both with images and also audio. And so the best way to understand this project, aside from asking a bunch of questions, which I think is the most important part of the project, is to look at every single piece of it as a portal. Like the same way a prayer is a portal to whatever God you pray to, this is the same to a religion that's relatively like unknown and obscure. This is the opportunity to look at like what Once Upon a Garden was from the first chapter. So if you think about it that way, it's the start of a very magical journey for me and for everyone who decides to pray with me. Pray to the machine, pray with the machine.